Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're stepping away from the usual and plunging straight into the shadows. We're going to dive deep into a genuinely terrifying piece of village folklore, a true horror story that literally shook an entire community to its core. We're looking at the chilling events that unfolded in the desolate, forgotten village of Bairavpur. So, maybe lower the lights a bit, turn up the volume, and prepare yourself, because the source material we're unpacking today, it is absolutely bone-chilling. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been walking alone at night? Maybe you're heading down a quiet hallway or a dark, empty street, and you hear the distinct sound of footsteps pacing right behind you. But when you whip around, there's absolutely no one there, just empty space and this creeping, awful sense of dread. Well, keep that horrific sensation in your mind, because for the people in the accounts we're looking at today, that dread wasn't just paranoia, it was a very deadly reality. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The Haunted Haveli. You see, every great piece of horror lore has a ground zero, right? And for Bairavpur, it was this old, ruined estate right on the outskirts of town. The source text paints this incredibly vivid scene for us. Evening time, the village is totally empty, light clouds rolling in, and this freezing cold wind whistling through the broken windows of this abandoned estate they called the Haveli. The locals were absolutely terrified of this place. They swore you could hear strange footsteps like some unseen presence just wandering the grounds. Well, enter Rina. She was visiting friends in the village and made this bold claim that ghosts just straight up don't exist. So, on a dare, she walks completely alone into the dark, ruined Haveli. And the second she shines her flashlight on the broken walls, the nightmare begins. She looks at the wall, and instead of her own reflection, she sees a second shadow. A shadow that was moving completely on its own. She calls out but gets no answer, just the slow, terrifying sound of heavy footsteps approaching her. Obviously, Rina ran out of there, pale and just trembling. But here's the thing about this curse. Escaping the physical ruins of the Haveli didn't mean she actually escaped the terror. The curse had latched onto her. Once she went back home, the horror followed her right through the front door. She started hearing those exact same footsteps pacing back and forth in her own bedroom in the dead of night. And even worse, she'd look into her mirror and see this blurry, indistinct shadow standing right behind her. Moving on to Section 2, Echoes of the Unseen. So what started with Rina definitely did not stop with Rina. This phenomenon, which the villagers actually started calling the ahat, meaning the echo or the sound of approaching footsteps, started spreading like wildfire. Take Raghu, the local barber. He was walking by the village pond late at night when he hears the footsteps. He tries walking faster, but the footsteps just match his pace perfectly. Suddenly, this white entity with glowing, deep green eyes completely blocks his path. Then we have Savita. She was just doing something totally normal, lighting a traditional diya lamp in her courtyard. A sudden gust of wind blows it out, and right there in the corner of her yard stood a terrifying woman in a black sari with wild, messy hair. And look at Amar, a bus driver. He was driving a completely empty bus on this lonely stretch of night road. He glances in his rearview mirror and sees a faceless passenger sitting in the very back seat dressed in all white. When he hit the brakes to check, the seat was totally empty. That's 3 completely different victims and 3 entirely different manifestations, but they're all tied together by that exact same horrific sound of approaching footsteps. And these encounters, they weren't just visual jump scares. They were deeply, deeply psychological. That entity with the green eyes didn't just stare at Raghu. It actually spoke to him. It whispered, "Raghu, your time has come. You cannot escape." Can you imagine hearing that? This specific encounter completely broke Raghu's mind. The source text actually notes that by the very next day, Raghu had descended into total madness, just running around terrified, screaming at the top of his lungs that the ahat was coming to take him away. At this point, pure panic gripped Bairavpur. People literally stopped leaving their homes at night. Desperate times, right? So a man named Mohan attempted to do a spiritual cleansing of the Haveli, but traditional defenses were utterly useless against this thing. Mohan starts reciting mantras to bring peace to whatever restless spirit is there, and in response, he hears heavy footsteps echoing on the stairs, heavy iron chains start moving violently all on their own, and then comes the final horrifying blow. A message suddenly appears on the wall, written in fresh blood, basically stating that escaping the ahat is impossible. Yeah, Mohan dropped his prayer beads and ran for his absolute life. Which brings us to Section 3, the skeptic's descent. With an entirely terrified village on their hands, the authorities had to step in. They sent in DCP Arvind, a police officer and, frankly, a man of pure cold logic. He literally laughed at the villagers' superstition, just completely dismissing the whole thing. He demanded to go to the Haveli himself, at night with just a flashlight, to find actual physical evidence. Well, the moment Arvind stepped inside those ruined walls, his precious logic was completely shattered. He heard them, the heavy, unseen footsteps echoing on the stairs. He pointed his flashlight everywhere, but there was no one there. And then, the ultimate terror. He physically felt an invisible hand clamp down hard on his shoulder. He spun around, ready to fight, and was met with nothing but empty air. And it didn't just touch him. Right into the ear of this staunch, non-believing skeptic, an invisible presence whispered this truly chilling command. It said, "If you want to know the truth, go down to the basement." So the really crucial point to understand here is that the entity wasn't just aimlessly scaring people away anymore. No, it was actively inviting them down into the dark. Now for Section 4, Lolita's gruesome truth. The tension had reached an absolute breaking point in the village, but for Reena, her fear had actually morphed into this desperate kind of curiosity. She teamed up with a schoolmaster named Anirudh, our skeptic DCP Arvind, and another local named Ankit. They realized that unless they uncovered the core secret of this place, the village was just going to be eaten alive by this fear. So, step 1, they arrive at the ruins at midnight. The silence is so absolute, they could literally hear their own hearts beating. Step 2, they navigate to the back of the Haveli and force open this massive rusted iron door. As it creaks open, they're hit by a powerful, rotting stench. And step 3, they slowly descend the stairs into the basement. The source material describes it as freezing cold, incredibly damp, with walls completely slick with moss. And sitting in the dead center of the room was a broken wooden platform. And right there, splashed across the basement wall, written in fresh, dripping blood, was this terrifying declaration. It read, "Ahat is my curse. Whoever hears it will meet their end." Just as they read those words out loud, a misty white shadow suddenly materialized right in the corner of the crypt, and the absolutely deafening sound of footsteps completely surrounded them. The spirit finally revealed the true crime lore behind this entire century of horror. The entity was Lolita. She was actually the original owner of the Haveli. Exactly 100 years prior, her intensely greedy husband had buried her alive right there in that very basement, just to steal her wealth. The source text explains that her dying screams, echoing in the dark as she slowly suffocated under the earth, ultimately manifested into the eternal, heavy footsteps that now haunted the entire village. With the truth out, the spirit's rage just boiled over. She screamed that her curse was infinite, and that simply knowing the truth was not going to save them. The basement started shaking violently. Dirt started raining down from the ceiling like the earth was trying to bury them alive too. They sprinted for their lives as the terrifying sound of footsteps closed in from every single direction, above them, below them, right beside them. Bursting out into the night air, Arvind realized that logic was useless here, but action wasn't. He came up with a desperate last-ditch plan. They had to burn the Haveli entirely to the ground to cremate Lolita's buried remains, hoping that would finally grant her peace. And so, they set the entire estate ablaze. And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, An Unending Curse. It really seemed like they found the perfect peaceful resolution, didn't it? If we look at the timeline, on day 1, the Haveli was reduced to ash, which presumably destroyed Lolita's physical anchor to the world. Day 2, the villagers gathered and held this massive collective prayer to cleanse the land. And by day 3 and beyond, well, for the first time in years, the village of Bhairavpur finally slept in peace. The nightmare of the Ahat seemed completely, 100% over. But our source text pulls the rug right out from under us. Sometime later, Reena is sitting in her room studying. Suddenly, a cold wind blows through her window. And then, from the dark corner of her room, the slow, distinct sound of heavy footsteps begins to echo once again. She calls out, trembling, but of course, there's no answer. The horrifying reality sets in for her and for us. The curse of the Ahat was never actually bound to the physical bricks of the Haveli. It's an unseen shadow. Once you hear it, it latches onto you, walking right behind you for the rest of your life. The villagers of Bhairavpur learned the hard way that burning down a building cannot burn away a curse. The Ahat is a shadow that follows its victims everywhere. Sometimes you hear it, sometimes you don't, but it is always there. So, as you sit here watching this explainer right now, if the Ahat is an eternal shadow, Who is walking behind you right now? Honestly, don't look back. Thank you so much for joining me for this terrifying dive into the echoes of Bhairavpur. Stay curious, stay focused, and I'll see you in the next explainer.